Hi everyone and welcome to Solo Board Gaming presents Navajo Wars, a history of the American Southwest 1598 to 1864. And this is of course a solo game designed by Joel Toppen and it's from GMT Games and this is the second edition and this is our playthrough. We'll be playing through the first scenario in the playbook, Rise of the People, and it covers the history of the Diné from the arrival of the Spanish in 1598 until the mid-1700s, so a period of well over 100 years we're going to play through now. Compared to some of the other scenarios, this is a relatively short one covering the first half of the Spanish period. And it says here, difficulty, this is the easiest scenario. Well, now then, I played the tutorial scenario, and as soon as I played through the whole of that, I set up for the first of two games of this scenario, Rise of the People. I lost the first one miserably, and then during the second one, thinking I'm getting a handle on it a little bit, I won with a minor victory, scoring just 1 point by the skin of my teeth. So we'll have a go at this. So I've set up the game per the instructions in the scenario description. So there's no need for me to go through step by step what I've done to set it up. You can easily follow that stage by stage in the setup instructions. However, it is worth going through a few things just so you can understand some of the reasonings behind what I've done. Now, first of all, over here, I have a couple of cups, one of which I've placed the intruder counters that we can draw from as and when necessary, and the other where I've placed the corn counters that we can draw from where necessary. And in the top right corner, this is the enemy out of play area. Now, what I put in here really is any enemy counters that may be used throughout the game, just so I can keep them in easy reach. For instance, here are piles of the enemy raid counters. I've also got piles of outposts, and in the Spanish period, it's missions. Okay, so when we build an outpost for the enemy AI, we build a mission. They're bordered in yellow. The tribal raid counters, these are nice, I quite like that. This is to signify raids into our territory by hostile tribes such as the Ute and Comanche. And I've also put the drought counters in there as well, just to keep them easily to hand. At the top, on the left, I've got my draw pile for the play deck over here. Now, the play deck, the instructions will tell you to make up 2 piles of 8 cards after you've shuffled them all together. 2 piles of 8 cards. That's operations cards and ceremony cards, all shuffled up, and 2 piles of 8. And then on top of one pile, you place historical card number 41, and on top of the other pile, you place historical card number 2. You shuffle each pile so that you don't know where those 2 historical cards are, and then place the pile that has historical card number 41 on top of the pile which has historical card number 42. So you know those 2 cards are in there, and the significance of those 2 cards is that as each of them come up, you will conduct a victory check. Now, potentially you can lose, or hopefully win, on any one of those. So I know somewhere in the first 9 cards is historical card 41, and somewhere in the second 9 cards is historical card number 42. So we have to prepare for those, and we'll keep the play deck there. The next thing, over the far side here, we have the culture deck. Now in the culture deck, we have one set of cards that I've selected to keep, and that is cunning. And we're going to draw one of those now. We're going to draw cunning level 1. And we're going to place that here at the top. Now, cunning level 1 will allow me, as long as I have culture points, to force the enemy to skip an operation instruction. So we'll see how that might work when we come to it. I used it once before in the last game and it served me well. The other culture cards, well, we can't pick any more culture cards unless we reach the point of doing a victory check. And each time we do a victory check on those historical cards, we can choose another culture card. And I keep those over here, out of the way. Now, hopefully this next bit is going to be helpful. Recall, I said we had 2 historical cards in this play deck, and each one will require a victory check. The first historical card, number 41, has 8 victory points on it, and we've got to beat that. The second one, card 42, has 10 victory points on it, and we've got to beat that. How are we going to do it? Well, take care as to where you place your tribes. Let's have a quick look here. I don't know if I'm getting the whole of this on camera, but we'll have a go. Can you see my 3 tribes? I have Family A here in the San Juan Valley, positioned well forward so that we can more easily raid outposts, the missions, should they come up, or New Mexico if required. Now the San Juan Valley, notice, is worth 3 victory points. Family B is in Shiprock. Shiprock is worth 4 victory points. Setup says one of our families, and I've chosen family C, should be set up in the Canyon de Chelly, which we've done here. There are no victory points for Canyon de Chelly. So far we're sitting on 4 and 3 victory points, 7 victory points. We know we can't beat even the first historical card. So we will certainly need the Zuni Mountains area, this green area here, because it is worth another 3 victory points, which would give us 10. So as long as we have these 3 areas, 2 of which we have at the moment, we can beat the first historical card and we can equal the second historical card, giving us at least a fighting chance. Other areas on the map, the 3 to the west, are also worth victory points, but less. Monument Valley is worth 2, Black Mesa is worth only 1, and Hopi Land here is worth 2. As you go through the later games, you will need to be occupying those areas as well to have any chance of beating those victory point checks when they come up with each historical card. So that's our goal. That's what we're focused on as we play through the game. What else is significant when it comes to one of those victory checks? Let's have a look over at the track. And again, the setup will inform you where to put each marker on the track. We start with 9 culture points, 5 military points, 3 action points, no movement points. That's fine. The enemy starts with 5 morale, and a ferocity of 4. Their ferocity level will determine how well the Spanish fight during a battle. The enemy available action points are denoted by this marker here. I'd like to use the marker rather than all of the action points tokens. Much easier to use the marker. For instance, they're going to start with 0 points, and as they gain points, it'll go up the track, and as they use them, it'll come down on each turn. Now, the relationships here are important. They're all important, but one of the most important is we looked at how many victory points we needed to have a chance of matching or beating those 2 historical cards that we know we're going to come across. The next thing to be wary of is the relationship between enemy morale and our military points. We need to keep our military points as high as we can, because during a victory check, the enemy morale, which is at 5 at the moment, is going to be deducted from our military points. Do you see? So at the moment, if there's a victory check right now and it's 5 and 5, our military points would plunge to 0. If the enemy morale was up at 7 and our military points were at 4, 7 from 4, let's take the 4 off for a start, plunging to 0. The other 3 would have to be taken in culture. 2 for each point that's owed. So that would be 6 points right down there, like so. Just because the enemy morale was higher than our military prowess. So, we'll see how that works, but it's just so that you can understand why during the game we'll be keeping our military as high as we can and try to diminish enemy morale whenever we can. And talking about the enemy, the last thing we need to have a look at during setup is the AI over the other side of the board. So here's the enemy instructions, and this, if you like, is the AI engine. And it really is one of the stars of the show of Navajo Wars. It's so mobile and dynamic and reactive. So basically, as the enemy earns action points, it will be able to play the topmost token at any one time. You see, it can subjugate for 1 point. If it has more points left, it can now build for another 3 points. If it still has more points, it can subvert now for between 1 and 3 points, depending on how many points it has left. At the end of the enemy's phase, all of these will move up the active board, and these will fill in down the bottom from the bottom, like so, pushing the rest up. And that's how you get through the enemy active column. In the enemy active column, at the start of every enemy phase, there will be 2 dice rolled. And the result of each, see these dice rolls here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each result, say 3 and then 5, will be turned over. 3 will be flipped, 5 will be flipped, but no it won't. Because if it has a red stripe, it can't be flipped, it's ignored. A red stripe can't be flipped, it's ignored. Let's turn that one back again. If you roll doubles, let's say 2 2s, then they are swapped, like so, from the standby column to the active column. Let's put these back. And when you're first set up, you put your hand in the bag that you're storing these in, you draw out 2 at random, discard those 2, they won't be used in the game. So this will set up slightly different every single time. Once you've done that, you then populate the AI machine, as I call it, because it works just like a machine. Starting with token number A, B, C, and so on. B is out. It's one of the discarded ones. I've got A, C, D, E, F. G is also out. It was one of the 2 discarded ones. H. And then from here, I, J, K, L, M, N, and so on. So as the enemy uses its action points, they move from active to inactive, and then round to the bottom, and they push the others up. And occasionally, when instructed, standbys can be swapped with active. So this AI changes all the time. Finally, we'll have a quick look down the bottom. You've seen where I've placed my families on the board, and here are the families that are in play at the bottom here. Family A, see the adult, male, female, and child. And another of their tokens here, family B and family C. The number of families in the game can grow, but I've so far found that quite difficult to do. And here you have the 3 starting elders. We need to look after those. Those are the 3 elders that we have. And in the out of play box, I've stacked all the other player tokens that we can use throughout the game. There are our spare family tokens. There's the elders. We have sheep and horses. We have the 2 harassment counters, a single firearms counter, and 3 of the trade goods counters. And we're ready to go with turn 1. Okay, now every turn starts with the turn of a card. So we turn over the first card of the play deck, and it's an operations card, and we follow all of its sections from top to bottom. It'll always have an operations segment, a major event segment, a minor event segment, and a final phase, normally a discard phase. So we start with the operational segment. Now, the enemy is going to collect 4 action points. Unless we preempt it and go first, but that'll cost us 3 action points. So we can spend our 3 action points, and that's all we have at the moment. We only have 3. Or we can keep them and let the enemy go first, in which case they'll have 4. If we go first, they will only have 2 action points. I think we'll do that. We'll spend our 3 action points to allow us to grasp the initiative. And we place the current card in the section on the board which actually says current card. The great thing about the design of this board is that there's a space on it for keeping just about everything. So although it's a very large board, you can keep the vast majority of your gaming pieces on the board itself. And I really appreciate that. I like that as a design feature. Now, we start with 3 elders, which means that we can activate, if you like, 3 families. The first thing we have to do, though, is decide whether we want to carry out operations, or whether we want to do planning, or we want to do a passage of time action. Well, we don't want to do passage of time. Let me explain passage of time. The passage of time action is more or less per its description. It's a phase that signifies the passage of time. Therefore, during that phase, if we choose to do it, we need to be feeding our families. Okay? So we need to make sure we have enough resource to feed our families. Plus, our families are growing, so that any kindred we've collected here in the passage of time box, and notice at the moment we have nothing because we haven't even started the game. Here, for instance, eventually we will be collecting adults, male and female, and children, and maybe even elders. When we see them lining up there, maybe that's the time to do passage of time. And that's not now. We can do a planning phase, and we won't do that now. So instead, we'll start with taking actions, and we'll leave planning and passage of time till later. So, 3 elders, we can activate all 3 families. Let's remind ourselves where they are. And I think the first thing we want to do is raid. By the way, when I activate my first family, and it's going to be family B, each family will start with 6 movement points. And I must remember to go first, we've already spent our 3 action points. So we have no action points left, but we're starting with 6 movement points. And rather than keep going over to that side of the board, I'll do most of the movement on that board off camera. And so, as we know, each family has 6 movement points. So with those movement points, we're going to start taking actions. And the actions that you can take, the choices that you have, you will find in the trifold player aid. The take action summary, and these are the kind of actions you can take. Find new water hole, move to an adjacent area, and so on. Trade at a fort, well, we don't have forts. Plant or harvest corn. Raid New Mexico. Raid an outpost, and so on. Part of the thing I love about this game is the way each of the valleys, San Juan Valley, Shiprock, Zuni Mountains, Monument Valley, and so on, Black Mesa, they're mapped out by these polished stones. And the polished stones show the track of the canyon or the valley. And the deeper you go into the valley, the harder it is to traverse the landscape. And that's shown by each area in the valley having a numerical value. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it's the same for all of the areas within each territory. Each colour is a territory. So each valley is a territory with its own victory points, and each polished stone is an area within that territory. So to move, we have to pay the value. For instance, if this family wants to move from here to here, it will pay 3 movement points out of the 6. Or from here to here, this is coming out of the valley, it will pay just 1 movement point out of the 6. Okay? The values in brackets, in parentheses, here's 1, 1, 2, 3, and so on, are the values that you will pay if the family were mounted on horses, and no one has horses yet. So, what a great idea it would be if we were to find ourselves some horses or even sheep to feed our families, because at some point you're going to want to do a passage of time action, and that's when we need to have enough resources in food to feed our families. So, how do we get sheep? How do we get horses? We do it by raiding, and we raid New Mexico. And that's shown on the map by Santa Fe here. We can do a long range raid into New Mexico, and that's shown on the choices on the player aid. But with a long range raid, rather than count the costs of each space, you simply pay all of your movement points. Theoretically then, even family C here in Canyon de Chelly could do a long range raid on New Mexico. But in doing so, it would pay all of its movement points, 6 movement points. For now, let's use family B. Family B will move from here to the entrance of Shiprock Valley and pay 1 movement point. And we have 5 movement points left. And we will raid New Mexico. Now, when raiding, whatever type of raid you do, long range or a normal raid, the counter itself stays where it is. If you like, it signifies the family group staying where it is and the men going forward to do the raid. But we pay the movement costs that exist between the family token and Santa Fe. And if we look here, the raid into Santa Fe would cost us one more movement point. A family token cannot actually move into Santa Fe itself. It merely conducts the raid from here, the men going forward, and pays one movement point. So we're doing that family raid now, and we pay another movement point, leaving us 4. And to conduct the raid, we take our bag. We do love a draw bag, and we draw one of those nice wooden cubes. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. And how did we get on in the raid? What do we pull? Yellow. We pull a yellow token. Check on your player aid on the back to find out what a yellow token pulled means. There's all the coloured tokens. And a yellow token, raid on New Mexico results. This side it's raid on outposts or forts. We ignore that. We're raiding New Mexico. We pulled yellow, slaves captured. Place 1 child counter into the passage of time box. So we take a child counter from the out of play box and we place it down here in passage of time. You'll see that in a moment. I've placed it in the passage of time box. The yellow cube goes onto the raided cubes circle over onto the right hand side of the board, and the family's ferocity goes up by 1. There it is in red, the ferocity rating, it's 0. If we turn it over, the ferocity rating is now 1, and our evasion ability has gone down to +1. Now, what does that signify? We've sampled raiding, we like it, so our ferocity has gone up by 1, and being emboldened, our ability to evade has come down by 1, and it's now only +1. Now remember, we have 4 movement points left. What can we do? We'll raid again for another movement point, down to 3 movement points. Let's dip into the bag, let's pull a cube, and it's brown. We look at brown. Horses stolen. Yes, place 1 horse counter into the resources box. And the family ferocity up by another 1. And the cube goes in the raided cubes circle with the yellow one. Our ferocity is now going to go up to 2. So we take this counter and replace it with the other counter from our family box. Our ferocity is now 2, and our ability to evade, or the likelihood that we would evade, has now gone down to 0. We're a ferocious band. Also, we take those horses, there they are, that we've just captured in that raid, and we place it in the resources box down on the bottom right. This family now has 3 resource points left, 3 movement points left. We've raided twice. We're going to move back, and we're going to pay 2 movement points to do so, leaving us 1, and we'll end there. You can't save movement points. So how did that pan out? There's the 2 cubes in the raided cubes box. Now the significance of that is that they're no longer available in the drawback. So it's more likely that we'll start pulling red cubes. And that's a bit more detrimental over the long term. The horses are in the resources box and have not yet been allocated to a family. We can do that at any time during any phase for any family, but at the moment they're in the resources box. Family A, for their turn, are going to plant corn. This will help feed us later. And to plant corn, we pay 4 movement points out of our 6 plus the value of the area we're in within the territory. We're in area 1, so we pay the 4 plus 1, 5 to plant corn. Take a corn counter at random out of, and I'm just trying to feel which is the top and which is the bottom, out of the draw cup, and place it in the same territory, in the same area as the family, and that's 5 of our 6 movement points. I did that just as an example. We have 1 left. We'll ignore that. You can't save movement points. Now, there's a value on the back of that. The value could be 1, 2, 3. When we harvest that, the corn will move down to the resource box and will be a resource for all families. This is how it's working now. Family C is in Canyon de Chelly. Soon I'll want to move them down into the Zuni Mountains, but not just yet. So for now, I'm going to do a long range raid on New Mexico. But remember, for that, I'm going to have to pay all 6 of my movement points. And I must not have spent any movement points with that family beforehand. Whatever movement points they have, they must spend the total amount for a long range raid. So let's do that. We'll take our bag once again. We'll draw. What we really want, you know, is some sheep. Oh, red. Okay, if it's red, we put it straight over into the Subjugation of New Mexico box. Because New Mexico, there it is, has started to be subjugated by the Spanish. And as such, they will benefit now when they receive their action points. When the enemy receives its action points, it will add 1 action point for having 1 cube in the box. And we draw again. And we have a brown. And what's that? We know that it's more horses. So that goes in the raided box, raided cubes. We take more horses from the out of play box and place the horses in the resources box. This is good raiding. We like this. All 3 families have taken an action, so now it's over to the enemy. Okay, it's the enemy turn, so we've moved over onto this side. Back to our card, follow it to the letter. Now, it tells us, because it's still the operations segment, because we preempted it, in other words, we went first, the enemy now only collects 2 action points, plus an additional action point because there's 1 red cube in the Subjugation of New Mexico box. So they have 3 action points. Because they've carried out some subjugation in New Mexico, it gives them that ability to carry out more actions. And that's understandable. This is very important. So that's why they've now got 3 action points. But there are 3 cubes in the raided cubes box. We've raided New Mexico 3 times. So if you like, that's also robbed the Spanish of the ability to carry out actions because of those constant raids. So the amount of cubes in the raided box is now subtracted from the enemy action points. So they subtract 3, which leaves them with 0 action points. However, the AI always gets at least 1 action point to spend. Ha ha! Okay, so we started off really well then. That raiding has worked really well, hasn't it? Not only did it get us horses, it's also kept the Spanish, if you like, on the back foot. But they had 1 action point, so let's look at the AI machine, as I like to call it. you always look at the first action, and the first action will be subjugate, and it costs them 1 action point, so they can only carry out that 1 action point, that 1 action. If they had 4 action points, the second one costs 3. Look, build costs 3 action points, so they could spend and carry out both of these actions. That's how their action points work. As it is, they can only carry out 1, and that's subjugate, so you move it into the inactive column. And let's carry out that subjugate action. And you'll find it on the enemy instruction summary, and it'll give a list of the actions that they can carry out. And subjugate is near the bottom here. And what they're trying to do, despite all our raids, is to continue to subjugate the peoples of New Mexico, basically consisting of the Pueblo tribes. So to subjugate, they're looking for red cubes. They'll take the bag, dive into the bag, and pull out a cube, and it's a black cube, and it does them no good whatsoever. So that cube goes into the recovery box, like so. Now, something I forgot to do. Dagnabbit. I forgot to do this. Just before you actually spend those points, you need to roll 2 die. And we have a 5 and a 4, which means, and I'll just move that across a little bit like so, counters 5, this one here, and 4, flip. Now, I mentioned before, anything with a red stripe cannot flip, but counter 4 can flip, so that's flipped over from raid to expand. And you should do that before you actually spend those points. I forgot to do that, but I've recovered it now. And finally, to end their move, because they've got no points left, they only had 1 to spend, this moves up, this counter moves all the way down to the bottom and fills in from the bottom like so. That's the enemy raid complete. Just to complete the picture for you, the enemy started off with, actually it was 2 action points. They had an extra 1 for the red cube, 3 action points. There were 3 cubes in the raided box, so that deleted those action points. The enemy always gets at least 1, and we spent it on an attempt to subjugate. So now we can go back and complete that card. We've completed the operations segment. We now go on to the major event segment, and it's Apache raids in New Mexico. And the Apaches are basically doing the same as we, the Diné, were doing ourselves. The Apaches will raid New Mexico, and they'll do so in more or less the same way. They'll draw a cube from the bag, and it's green. Follow the instructions here. If it's green or blue, place it back into the raid pool. And the raid pool is the bag. It goes back in. And that's completed the major event segment, simply following the instructions to the letter. Now the minor event segment, roll to see which territory recovers from drought. We don't have any territory in drought, so we pass straight on to the discard phase. And the discard phase means we merely discard that card, like so, into a discard pile, and start turn 2 by taking the next card off the deck. What's it going to be? That'll be in our next video. Thanks for watching. This is going to be exciting. We're going to play through the whole of this campaign as we attempt to help our families to survive the onslaught of the Spanish. Thanks very much. Please subscribe. Please like the video if it's been of any help, and see you in the next one. Cheers now, bye bye.